February 14, 2024. Mr. President, committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred Senate File 3, State Employee Leave for Volunteer Fire or Volunteer EMS, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, and Dockstader. No, Senators Bouchard and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Chair Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 15, Acceptance of Retrocession Federal Military Installations, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 17, Plane Coordinate System Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred Senate File 9, Parental Rights in Education 1, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Scott, and Steinmetz. No, Senators Rothfuss. Senator Scott, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Just a quick little announcement. We got back after the end. We have 132 committee and personal bills and 5 journals. So 137's on the Senate side's official numbers. I haven't seen the House side, but that'll be ours. All told, it's 137. So, bills on second reading. These bills, folks, if you look at your sheet, we're going to be out of order because we actually got them posted and they were scattered between numbers. So if you look at the screen up there, they actually are all coming out in numerical order as they always have rather than scattered. So Senate File 12, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 12, Meat Processing Plants, Hides, and Carcasses.
Senate File 12, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 14, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 14, State Fair Board, Powers and Responsibilities.
Senate File 14, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 20, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 20, Electricity Rates for Costs that do not benefit Wyoming.
Senate File 20, having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 47, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 47, Law Enforcement Retirement Contributions.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in.
Senate File 47, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 2, delete.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 47 and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, we had a great debate yesterday on this suite of bills, and it relates to how the increase in retirement savings contributions are made, whether they're made both by the employee and employer, in this case, the state, whether they're split, and what the implications of that would be. So, Mr. President, what this amendment does is it takes the employee's share and makes it also an employer's share. So in other words, all of the increase to the retirement savings that is required will be borne by the state rather than by the employee. And the implications of that are what we discussed, which is that out-of-pocket pay cut to our law enforcement, so where we're taking around $1,500 a year from their pocket and putting it towards their retirement, that would be unchanged. That would then be picked up by the state of Wyoming And so those hardworking folks around the state of Wyoming enforcing laws that, again, are not necessarily making large wages would not have a decrease to their revenue. The implications here, Mr. President, are clear on lines 17 through 19, where the prior appropriation of $2 million becomes an appropriation of $4 million, which just makes sense. It's the same amount of money, but rather than that $2 million being taken out of the pockets of law enforcement, it's taken out of the state's coffers. And I'd remind the chamber, Mr. President, discussion yesterday, this retirement plan is the work of the state of Wyoming. It was built by the state of Wyoming, and it was offered to our employees as compensation when they sign up. There's no question there are some challenges with it moving forward. We know that we have to keep it actuarially sound, but it's not the employees that screwed things up. It's not. None of them ever had a say in the structure of this plan. And the idea that we would recognize the failures of the past and try to remedy those failures by taking money out of the pockets of our employees, law enforcement, police, taking $1,000 a year, $1,500 a year from them so that we can correct it, just seems unfair to me. It just seems dishonest to me. This provides a remedy for that. It keeps the fund actuarially sound, but it does so at an additional cost to us. And Mr. President, I'll say that there are following amendments which basically do the same thing for the next couple of bills. I was just trying to make sure that there was parity there. But at this point in time, the second reading amendment on Senate File 47 addresses specifically those that are covered by this legislation. I'd ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment to protect our hardworking law enforcement.
Senator Kinski? He's not one. Senator Kinski, oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My bad.
I rise with a question, make sure I understand. You're not proposing to take a 2.5% employee share and pay it. You're saying it will permanently become the employer's share, if I'm understanding it correctly. And I really have to draw a strong objection to that. I don't know what the future is going to bring, folks, in terms of the fortunes of the state of Wyoming. But we have on the books a split between employer and employee that says, let's say it's 50-50. We've made the decision we're going to pick up most of the employee's share, budget to budget to budget. But if you went into the soup, you have the option of saying, I'm sorry, we got to start pushing some of that back onto the employees. I mean, if times get really desperate, that would be an option a future legislature could look at. So to say we're just going to permanently make this employer share is a different conversation than saying, do we want to put another couple $1 million on the table and pick that up? So if I'm correctly understanding this amendment, I've got to be adamantly against it. Thank you.
Further? Any further? Senator Rothfuss, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this will be for my second time, so I don't want to cut debate off if there's more debate. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Addressing the good vice president's question. Yes, there's two ways this can be done. One way is to have the state pay the employer's share, the increase. The other, even though this is nuanced and mathematical, and I understand the good vice president understands it, but I don't know if everyone else here is necessarily going to easily track this. There is, in this amendment, a shift from the employer's share to the state share of that 2.5%. So it does change the responsibility. And Mr. President, there's a reason for that. And while we like to think this is a split, when you go back and you think about how the legislature has taken action in the past, it really isn't wise to have a significant portion of it out of the employee's paycheck, and then have the state pick that up. So why is that? That portion is counting effectively as the salary of the employee. And even though it is pre-tax, right, it's not going to be taxed the same. It counts as their salary. So when you contemplate the high 3 years of that employee way out in the future, and you contemplate the trajectory of the actuarial study on how that math works out, it's more expensive for the state in the long run to have a portion made up by the state on the employee side than the employer's side. So, Mr. President, to take that to an extreme, it would be much less expensive for the state to be picking all of this up as employer side, none of it employee side, and that would be actuarially better. But we don't do that. We made this choice way back in the past. Again, some of the challenges we created as we implemented a retirement system. But Mr. President, the reason I made the choice to put it onto the employer side is that that's better for the state of Wyoming and better for the actuarial soundness if we're not incorporating the retirement side of things as a employee contribution, if we're making it a state contribution. So it's a net savings for the state to do it that way. I understand that we contemplate it as skin in the game, but the reality is it's in the paycheck. If we're taking it out, it doesn't matter which pocket we're taking it out of. That's just gamesmanship. But it does matter. It does matter from the actuarial side and the way we calculate the retirement. So I don't want to decrease it further because that would actually hurt the employee. But in this circumstance, this approach would net save the state money in the long run and improve the actuarial soundness. We don't have that data. I can't present that data in that study, but that's just the way that math is going to work out. So to the good Vice President, that's the justification. Again, I urge everyone to support second reading amendment number 1.
Thank you. Question being called. We're about to vote on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 47. It involves money, so this will be a roll call vote.
Second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 47. Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Barlow.
Excused.
Excused. Beitman. No. Boner. No. Bouchard. No. Brennan. No. Case. No. Cooper. Aye. Dockstader.
Excused.
Barlow. Aye. Dockstader excused. Ellis. Aye. French. No. Murphy. Aye. Baru. Aye. Hicks. No. Hutchings. No. Ide. No. Jones. No. Kinski. No. Cole. No. Landon. Aye. Larson. No. McEwen. No. Nethercott. No. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. No. Schuler. Aye. Scott. No. Steinmetz. No. Dockstader. No. President Driscoll.
No.
No. Closing vote. Cooper, aye to no. Baldwin, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. Second reading amendment number 1. 9 aye, 22 no.
Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 47 has failed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senate File 47 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 48, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 48, Patrol Warden and Investigator Retirement Contributions.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in.
Senate File 48, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 9, delete.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, sensing that the vote would go the same way, this amendment is effectively the same as the prior amendment, but for a different bill. It mirrors. I will withdraw second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 48 at this time without objection.
Objection so ordered. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 48 is withdrawn. We're back on the bill. Senate File 48 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 49, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 49, Judicial Retirement Program Contributions.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in, please.
Senate File 49, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 16, delete.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, and for the same reasons, without objection, I would withdraw second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 49.
Thank you. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 49 has been withdrawn. There's a second amendment. We have it read in, please.
Senate File 49, second reading amendment number 2, page 2, line 16, delete.
Senator Drew.
I'd like to move a second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 49 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members of the 67th, if you'll look, this is just a technical correction. We were a little dyslexic on our writing, and we've got a 7.47% on page 2, line 14, and it should be 7.47%. So this is just a technical correction, but it does need a motion and a vote. Thank you very much. Glad to answer any questions.
Question being called. This would be a voice vote. We're voting on second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 49. All in favor, say aye. All those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 49 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senate File 49 have been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 58, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 58, Investment of State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund.
Senate File 58 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 59, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 59, Federal Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund Adjustment.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in, please.
Senate File 59, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 16, delete.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 59. Folks, this is something that was caught by the department, asked us to correct this. We were setting this off on July 1, 2024, and they said they need to do it on a calendar year basis. So it would become effective January 1, 2025.
Further discussion? Question being called. This will be a voice vote. We're voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 59. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 59 has passed the Senate. Back on the bill. Senate File 59 haven't been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 67, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 67, Public Employee Retirement Plan Contributions.
Senate File 67 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolves itself into the committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Senator Biden. After many years. Good to see you. That's kind of fun, huh? Yes.
Committee of the whole, please come to order. Senator Nethercott, let me find your microphone. Privilege is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good senators, we are so fortunate here today to be joined by the incredible Leadership Wyoming class of 2024. If we could give them a warm Senate welcome, most of them are right to the front of us. So a big round of applause to the Leadership Wyoming, our fellow leaders for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome to the Senate. Senator Kinsky,
Privilege of the floor, please.
floor is yours.
You know, these folks all filled the Appropriations Committee room, and I was afraid I was really in trouble when I drew a crowd that loud and large on an appropriations bill. Folks, you have on your desks a printout that is labeled constitutionally permissible content of a general appropriations bill. It's important, and I know we're getting overwhelmed with budget stuff, but this is going to figure prominently in our discussions of the budget bill. Over the years, footnotes in 300 series in budget bills have waxed and waned. Sometimes for a while there were very few, and then it would sort of get out of hand, and then it would get under control again. 2016, Dave Groover, who was really a brilliant lawyer, was head of LSO. And he said, we've got to get this under control. It's just out of hand. He said, we're going to get sued. And so he wrote this memo, constitutionally permissible content of the general appropriations bill. And so there are some things that constitutionally can be in an appropriations bill, some things that cannot. He describes it at length, but the biggest three are appropriations under the Constitution's appropriations are supposed to be for the ordinary expenses of government. And if it's not for that, it's impermissible. Second, it's actually substantive law, and that belongs in a single subject bill. Our Constitution requires that every bill shall have a single subject, or encroaching upon separations of powers. So it's really an excellent memo. I know there's a lot there, but it is something to bear in mind in the coming days as we go through the budget, because you'll see footnotes and notes that may tread a fine line, and some that clearly are over the line. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kinsky. Any more privileges of the floor, or shall we get to work? Looks like we're ready to go. The chief clerk ran off on me, so we'll hold on 1 second till she gets back. Looks like we're finalizing our general file bills here. We're working on the order of the general file. Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the Senate stand at ease to the sound of the gavel until 2:45. We've got to work on the general file here just a little bit, folks. So 15 minutes. Plan on moving back in here.
Okay, the Senate will stand at ease for 15 minutes. To the sound of the gavel.
Yes, sir.
The committee of the whole will please come back to order. Senator Hicks, Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So folks, things are gonna move pretty fast here, and these are committee bills. And so, you know, I think everybody needs to be prepared because we've got a lot of other introductions. We got a big budget this year we gotta go through, so we're time limited. So I'm just gonna ask everybody on your committees for the next few days, when we get into general file, we've got a very limited amount of time, that if you may walk out of here on either a noon or a morning, particularly with morning meetings, you should be expecting to present those bills in the afternoon. You know, I think the Appropriations Committee kicked out 8 bills yesterday in the morning, and they all did them in the afternoon. We've just got to move that fast, and particularly these committee bills. So as you guys work these bills in committee, just make sure whoever's going to be presenting the bill is ready within a couple hours of the time of that coming out of committee. So we just need to move this stuff along, Mr. Chairman. And with that, we do have well, we've got some technical difficulties going on right now. We've worked with the chairman. I think the chairman all know which bills will be up here. We'll announce those, but let's keep the process rolling. So what I would ask is Chief Clerk, if you can give us all a purview of the order of the bills. So I would ask you to write these down. So you know, and if you're a presenter on these bills, you know when you need to be ready. So if we can have that bill list with the title and the committee that it came out of, so folks can be ready to present.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader Hicks. Minority Leader Rothfuss,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Privilege of the floor.
privilege is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I respect the need for speed, so to speak, for getting these bills through, but I do think it's very important that there be adequate time for the senators to be able to sort through what's coming up on general file, have an opportunity to consider amendments, read through those bills, and organize around it. That gets better debate. That ensures that there's engagement. And I'll remind the chamber that the purpose of committee of the whole is not just to decide whether you like a bill or not. A lot of us know whether we like bills or not going in. A big purpose of committee of the whole is to strengthen the bills, to find flaws, to test it against what are the unintended consequences, what are the real world implications of these pieces of legislation, and to talk that through with the benefit of 31 senators. If we're not adequately prepared, and candidly, I don't know that I'm going to be adequately prepared for all of these bills. The ones that came to my committee, I'm fine. But the ones that went to other committees, I haven't read them in detail. I usually wait to read those bills until they come up on a list, which tells me they're going to be on committee of the whole, which tells me read those bills. I wish I had the time to read all of the bills ahead of session, but a little secret, everyone, I don't read them all. And I know nobody in here does either. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'll just ask the good majority floor leader, while some of these bills should probably be easy and not contentious because we're still in the committee bill phase, I do think it's important that those that might be more complicated, those that might need more thought, and those that are probably going to be debated be given an opportunity to have that overnight listing so that we can all be ready and prepared for Cal the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Majority Leader Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and to that point, the way to get a purview on that, so every morning when you come in, and we're obligated to post those committee bills with a 24-hour notice or the day before notice, the committees. Each one of your committee chairmen stands up and says, the time of the committee, these are the bills that we're going to take up. So this is the case and example, and this is just something we need to learn as we go along. This is the list of bills that were announced yesterday that were on your desk early this morning, and actually it was posted yesterday at 2:33 that was going to be in committees. Now, there on occasion, there's bills that don't come out of committees, but typically when they're when they're interim topics, committee bills, the vast majority make those out. So I would encourage you, to the minority floor leader's point, don't wait till the last minute. There's some of these that you can start previewing the night before and the morning before we come in here, because they're posted. And particularly these committee bills, be ready to present, be ready to debate and ask questions to the minority floor leaders. But you do have a little leeway with at least these interim committee bills that probably, I would say 90% plus of those are going to make it to committee of the whole. So look at those, look at that schedule when you go home tonight. Be ready to look at it in the morning so you know what's coming up here in general file today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect to the majority floor leader, the process for all the years that I've been in the legislature, and many of us remember the board, has been posting the cow the night before. And then the next day, everybody has it organized. Everybody's ready to debate those bills. Everybody knows what those amendments are. So while it is possible for us to take that sheet and speculate which bills we think will probably pass and may then make committee of the whole, although I think we've all had bills pass committees that never made it to committee of the whole, I think it's much more effective and appropriate for senators to know what is slated for committee of the whole, subject to change, but certainly the first 5 to 8 of those, so that we can all be very prepared and have read them. It's better for debate. It's better for the product. And I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, that we take the time. Hurrying doesn't lead to good legislation. We're always in a hurry, but it'll be okay. It'll be okay if we pause a little bit, take our time and do it right.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I have the list of bills on general file that we will be going through today. We have Senate File 4, rehiring retired firefighters, continued retirement benefits by labor. Oh, it's being passed out. Great. So you don't have to listen to my NPR voice. I'll pause while you guys receive that list and have a chance to look at it before we get going. How about that? Unless you want to dive right into Senate File 4. Are you guys ready for Senate File 4? All right, let's get to work. Okay. First bill up for consideration is Senate File 4. Will the clerk please read it in?
Senate File 4, rehiring retired firefighters, continued retirement benefits, sponsored by the Labor Committee, was referred to committee number 10, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Lockstader, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure, Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rises to report, I do so with a favorable recommendation for Senate File 4, rehiring retired firefighters - continued retirement benefits. And for an explanation of this short, great bill, Senator Hutchings will tell it about.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, both of you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman. I'm going to do my best. Again, we're doing this a little fast, but I think you'll understand. I'm going to read through what I received from the director of the Wyoming Retirement System to help you understand. We all know that volunteerism is down, and our volunteer firefighter force is just the same. We heard in committee today that one area, they started out with 12 volunteers and now it's down to 4. And to me, as a former volunteer firefighter, that's kind of sad. So what we'd like to do with volunteerism being down is bring back some of that expertise when guys retire and they start their pension. If they're needed, bring them back. So the director of the Wyoming Retirement System says that the WRS, they support this proposal, that this bill is the same language that was used to rehire retirees from public employee, law enforcement, Air National Guard, warden patrol plans and makes this effective also in the firefighter pension plan. With the rule, the member has the option to keep drawing their benefits and also return to work. No further retirement credits will be earned, and the employer pays the retiree fee equal to the normal total contribution rate. It's designed to help employers fill critical positions. It's designed to be actuarially neutral for the retirement system. In the tight labor market, employers may find it difficult to fill these critical positions, and retirees may be a valuable labor source since they are already trained. He also mentioned that he believes that this won't happen often, and that when it comes to the scarcity of volunteer firefighters, it will be rare when used, but when it is used, it'll be pretty darn important. So we have the let me see, on page 1, rehiring the retiree member, and on page 2, the pensions amount. It's pretty simple and straightforward, and we ask for your favorable aye vote on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any discussion on the bill? Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple points of clarification to help out the body is that number one, this includes the Plan B firefighters who we discussed at length in this body. And I would add to that, these Plan B firefighters have a 25-year retirement plan. And very many of them, let's just use age 50 for an example. Some may be more, some may be younger. But when they finish up, they still have a lot of abilities. They have a huge amount of training that they've gotten through their employment. They still have ability to do some work. And what this bill does is allow for those firefighters in Plan B to then come back into the employment in departments that may or, have a need. It was noted in committee that the volunteerism, of course, is way down, but beyond the volunteerism, the list of people that are applying to be paid firefighters is dropping off considerably. They still have enough to fill the vacancies right now, but it drops off a little each year, and there's stories as of positions that 400 people applied for the slots, and now we're down to maybe 50. So it's significantly dropping off. And as I told these guys, firefighters aren't somebody that can work from home, right? They've got to be on the job. So this will be an important benefit to keep our firefighters. And in this case, these will be the Plan B, fully paid, the firefighters that are working in your cities, in Casper and Cheyenne and Rock Springs, wherever that is in the communities. But that's what this plan applies to. Most of those firefighters that are now retiring are retiring and going on to do another job. Maybe they're carpenters, maybe they hang or drywall, whatever they do. But this gives us the ability to use their talents, use their training they've accumulated to benefit our departments and benefit our cities.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I'm a little bit confused on, say somebody did retire when they were young, able, healthy, say they're 45 years old, they're drawing their full benefits. And then for an example, week later, they hire on again and they're drawing 2 salaries. Can somebody kind of give me a little clarity on that? Thank you.
Senator Guru? Oh, no, not Senator Guru. Let's go back to you, Senator Baldwin.
Senator Grew just wanted to stretch his leg.
Yeah, he's tired of this conversation.
And the thing is, this is exactly the same in several of the retirement programs. Matter of fact, we heard that there's only one group that's not in a retirement system, and that would be judges. And most judges don't want to come back after they're 70 years old or wherever they're at. They don't want to come back and do more work as a judge. And so this is happening in all the retirements across the board. And you're right, they come back. What does change is that they don't accumulate any more service points. They will be getting those salaries, but they won't be gathering any more service points, to add on to their retirement down the road. So you're right, they will be getting their retirement, but they won't be getting any further service points. And I say it's something that's happening across the board now. We did it with our game wardens. We did it with several of the law enforcement people last year. And several other departments already had it. I say the only ones that don't have this right now is the judiciary. So.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious whether there was any discussion or any concerns about the need to be keeping the pipeline filled, so to speak. And I know there was some discussion about challenges for hiring and perhaps a focus on unfilled positions and filling those in. But the concern would potentially be you have quite a few retired firefighters that take these positions, and then you don't end up recruiting a new younger generation, and you get yourself in a circumstance where all of your experience continues to age and you don't have continuity. And I'm wondering if we've seen that in any of the other programs, if that's a concern, or if this really would just be focused on cases where you needed a temporary hire or you needed to fill a position that was unfilled.
Senator Baldwin.
Let's go ahead and take Senator
Oh,
Cole
wait,
first.
Senator Cole, go to you first and then back to the center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would like an answer on the fiscal note. The fiscal note is a little confusing. I mean, if I read it the way it appears, it basically states that once you retire, you won't accrue any more benefits. Then it goes on to talk about full-time positions that are replaced. My confusion is this: why wouldn't this help the fund? Because the employer still has to contribute into the unemployment fund. And so why wouldn't it have a positive impact on the unemployment fund instead of a negative, a neutral one? It just doesn't make any sense. Can someone help me understand why there isn't a positive impact when you hire people, rehire people that aren't accruing any more retirement, value, and yet you're paying into the system with premiums? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Baldwin.
And I think we can get a better answer for that down the road, but off the top of my head, I would tell you that these people are not going into new positions. These people would be filling positions that are open as we go. So if this retired firefighter were not to go into that position, then there would still be a firefighter in that position. It just won't be this guy that retired. We're not going to bring a retired fireman and just add on to the ranks. Instead of having 20 firemen, we're not going to have 21 or 22. We're going to have still 20. So they would be filling a spot that someone else would have taken otherwise. So I would say that we're paying the same benefits. We're paying still the same, perhaps less, because we're not accruing any additional retirement. But we can certainly get a better answer for you and more of an answer for that. But that would be my answer. And I already forgot what the other question was. Oh, if this is a problem already, if we're aging our ranks. And I would say we heard that, no, it's not a problem right now. My suspicion would be that it won't be a problem. We were told in committee that the incidents of this happening are actually probably quite low. We wouldn't see very many people coming back into this, but it will make an availability of something that we will be able to use down the road. That was the topic that was assigned to our committee for the interim, was firefighter recruitment across the board, and EMS and search and rescue. And this is one of the ways of making it, a benefit to bring those people back in, and something that may help us down the road, because recruitment is gradually becoming a problem more rapidly in the volunteer ranks, of course, but also it's coming in the paid ranks. And this is one of those tools that we could perhaps use to abate that problem. We would like to be able to bring new people into the fire service, paid and volunteer. That we passed up one bill for the firefighter recruitment film, but I will tell you, each fire department in the state, paid and volunteer, is actively going out now trying to recruit new members. They're having open houses. And I think you will probably see some things on some of the social media accounts trying to recruit new people into the fire ranks, and EMS for that matter. But it is happening. We're trying to get out and do it, but that was our topic for the interim, was trying to bring new people into the fire service. It's fun, it's exciting. I don't know why nobody wants to do it. Maybe it's because it takes a lot of time. Maybe it's because it takes time away from your family. You'd have to ask my wife. Maybe she likes me being gone. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's something we need to bring people in. So that's my answer. I hope that answered your questions.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a question about the neutrality or potential neutrality that the fiscal note speaks about. And actually, I'm going to reach out to the director of that organization to have them further explain that. And I'll have an answer for that on second reading. So I don't have an answer, a qualified answer for that, but I will get that at second reading. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? question being called. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 4, please say aye. All those opposed? Senate File 4 is passed the committee of the whole. Next bill up for consideration is Senate File 8. Will the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 8, Health Insurance for Volunteer Emergency Responders, an act relating to compensation and benefits sponsored by the Labor Committee, was referred to Committee number 10, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Dockstetter, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 8, Health Insurance for Volunteer Emergency Responders. For an explanation of that bill, I turn to my neighbor here on the back row, Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you. Senator Dockstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bringing in Senate File 8. Folks, this is where we move in the word volunteer into firefighters, emergency medical personnel, volunteer search and rescue, and consider them for these health insurance programs. And the bill itself takes you all the way through and adds the word volunteerism. Now, would we give this insurance to just anybody that shows up? No, they have to meet qualifications. They have to be there 90 days. They have to attend the training meetings, 50% of those. They have to be ready for 25% of the calls. They just don't get to show up and get the insurance. They have to qualify for it. And then it's renewed and reconsidered every year. But as you go through the bill, I'm not going to go to each point, but you'll see the additions of those qualifications and you'll see the word volunteerism added all the way through the piece of legislation. When we were going through this morning, and let me just back up just a moment here. How many does this affect? You'd be surprised. I was surprised. In the state of Wyoming, we have 3,637 firefighters. What do they respond to? 43,855 incidents a year. In my neck of the woods, they responded, I feel like even more because we're on one of the major conduits off the Wasatch Front into the national parks. And every time there's an accident, they have to roll. And these are volunteers. I'm amazed at the kind of people. Some of them work at a nearby mine. Some of them work at their own businesses. Some of them are just a guy with a truck and a toolbox, and he's a contractor, and he drops what he's doing, and he jumps out and rolls with the fire truck. These are the best people we have in the state. 88% are volunteers, or with mostly volunteer fire departments. 88%. That's why we're looking at a volunteer insurance program. This morning while we're in meeting, so a family checked in from the far west, out on the west side of Teton County. They'd been the father had been volunteer firefighter for what, over 2 decades? And they talked about their expenses, just simply trying to volunteer and help in Teton County, but also keep up with their job as well. So for their insurance program that they have now, and I won't use the proper names, but with their insurance program now, they have their premium is nearly $3,000, $2,885. And that gets them just the bare minimum. Doesn't even really get them anything. It's just nearly $3,000 a month just to say, well, I've got some insurance. Family deductible, $12,000. And so they spend a lot of money every month just making sure they got insurance. Now, if we opened up this opportunity for them in the state of Wyoming, the group plan for 2024 provides multiple options for them at a cost between $2,000 and $2,400. And they would have a much better plan, and they would have deductibles between $9,000 and $4,000. This is what they reported to us live this morning in our meeting from out the west side of Teton County. They were looking for some help. They want to continue all these years of service, 2 decades plus. They want to continue helping, but they're looking for a little assistance. So in summary, folks, what this does, once again, it's a major recruitment tool. The individual pays for the premium, not the state. The people, the firefighters, they're paying for it. We're just making it a more affordable approach for them. They have to meet those attendance records. They have to be there attending their meetings, showing up to the fires. They have to do something to qualify for it. And they have to renew it annually. They have to reconsider. This folks opens up a big opportunity for those who help take care of us across the state, and I'd ask for your support.
So, Mr. Chairman, I've
Senator
got a
Harris.
couple of questions just to find out how the discussions were when I look at this. And I think I understand the explanation from my friend from Star Valley that we all know that you're mandated to have insurance nowadays. That's a federal law. They have a thing called an exchange out there they get. But as I understand it, it would be cheaper for all of these volunteers to potentially go on to the state group health insurance program. I want clarification on that. Was there any discussion as, so it's great, they're paying for it, that's a good idea. I like the concept behind the bill, I just needed a little more explanation from a standpoint. What was the discussion when you have potential, this was just 3,000 plus volunteer firefighters, I don't know if that included numbers with the EMS and search and rescue and all those others. But when they come on to the state group health insurance, depending on how much they utilize that, it will change the cost of that insurance to the state of Wyoming. And the increase, because it could potentially, so if there was a lot of use of the program, it could potentially raise the cost of the other to all the other participants in the program. I think it's a good idea, but I just think with that discussed, was there any discussion about requiring some level of monitoring by ANI to see if this is kind of a driver? The database would allow them to do that. And just, was there some discussions that we can monitor this to see if it has any effect on the overall premium rate for all of the other participants in this program? Or do they fall in the same actuary class as far as utilization of the healthcare plan and that stuff? I'm just asking questions, Mr. Chairman, to see if those were discussed and what were those discussions and any thought of any monitoring by ANI.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just there again, I don't understand the budget in detail, but I do understand that education and the health department are the two big areas that we fund with public funds. And, you know, there's an incomplete fiscal note on this, so it's hard to understand, you know, what do the numbers look like here? And from what I can tell, we are growing the public health department here with this. So just want to be cautious here on not having to raise taxes in the future. Thank you.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we should be clear. First of all, this is not run through the Department of Health. This is run through our employee group insurance, which is run through ANI, which is a program. And I don't know the numbers. Probably some of our appropriators could speak to it, but I think we're insuring probably in the neighborhood of 35 to 40,000 lives through, including employees and their dependents. So, and that could be off. That's reaching back quite a ways to try to come up with that number. So, but it certainly does. And I think actually, if you do look at the fiscal note, you will see that if they certainly, this is the EGI insurance plan, and it's unknown, the cost is indeterminable, because as I go onto a insurance program, whether I'm getting vehicle insurance or whatever, my risk for accident, if it's on in a vehicle, or my risk for health challenges or concerns, all play into that. And then actually what happens, what actually occurs, and that affects future rates, premiums, et cetera. So there's no question that this may have an impact. It may not have any impact. It may have a little impact, you know, up or down. But I think, and I don't know the answer, this is, I think, a smaller group in a very large pool. And what this access to this program does is it allows them to have the access to that broadening out of the risk pool. And that's actually what the value is here. And that's why some of these other programs, including those that are offered through the federal government, aren't as good and aren't as favorably financially, is because there's fairly small risk pool, fairly small group of people sharing risk instead of a large pool sharing it over a broader and more people and more premiums being paid into it collectively. So I can't speak to that. I'll try to get some information on the numbers. Unfortunately, that agency that's responsible for overseeing this program was not in our committee meeting this morning, but I will follow up with them and for second reading. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question about the ERISA compliance with this. The concern that I've heard in the past about trying to expand EGI and our pool of coverage is whether or not they're deemed to be appropriately covered state employees pursuant to federal ERISA, which gives some tax exemptions associated with how that plan can operate. So oftentimes it's hard to expand. Was that a discussion that was addressed with this particular piece of legislation, or is that something we should contemplate?
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that was addressed by our retirement executive director, and the rules of retirement division or the retirement system have adopted are consistent with Department of Treasury IRS rules that that allow these other groups that we've already allowed access into this program to take. So this would be basically a cookie cutter for what we've done with other ones. The rules that the state of Wyoming, to my understanding, the testimony this morning, are consistent with federal guidance and policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Senator Dockstader.
Thank you. We will follow up with the A&I. Those numbers are difficult. Folks, if you live in a city, you're not going to know this connection. If you're from a Casper or Cheyenne or larger cities where there are paid fire departments, you're not going to feel this connection. For those of us who live in the rural areas and we see our firefighters roll out, drop what they're doing repetitively, week after week, all hours of the night. I know because I chase them as part of my other job to make sure they get coverage of what they're doing. They drop what they're doing. This is a small ask. They are taking care of the coverage. They're paying for it. And a risk, these are the younger people in our state. These are the people that are staying fit already. They have to go through training in a firefighting situation. They're already in good health. I don't worry about those numbers creeping up. I worry more about filling the open gaps in our people that are volunteers. That's changed. That's all changed. This opens up an opportunity to bring those people into these volunteer firefighting departments all across the state and give them some assistance and some help. They have to qualify by being with the department for 90 days. They have to meet the training meetings. They have to be at the calls. I don't see this as a handout anyway. I see us stepping up and helping take care of those who help us. Ask for your support.
Further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 8, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Senate File 8 is passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 21. Would the reader please read in Senate File 21?
Senate File 21, Public Utilities Net Power Cost Sharing Ratio, an act relating to public utilities sponsored by the Corporations Committee. Was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Boner, Case, Landon, Scott. No, Senator Barlow. Senator Case, Chairman.
Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 21, Public Utilities Net Power Cost Sharing Ratio. Mr. Chairman, there is a standing committee amendment. I'd ask that it be read in at this time.
Senate File 21, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 6, after.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the standing committee amendment to Senate File 21. And for an explanation of the bill and to handle the standing committee amendment, I ask that you call on Senator Boner.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is one of the many bills that the Corporations Committee sponsored, dealing with the increased questions we have around how we deal with electrical utility rates. I think we all heard about a very significant one that was considered by our Public Service Commission. It's still being considered in some ways by our Public Service Commission. One of the elements of that case was this idea of sharing the cost of the fuels that a utility needs to produce electricity, coal, natural gas. That was, we know that some of those prices have been very volatile. And of course, one of the large utilities in the state attempted to make the case that this was the reason why they're going to ask for a rate increase. Simultaneously with that, they also asked to eliminate what is currently the practice, which is to share the costs of those fuels with the customer, but also they take a portion of that. A 80% rate where the customer pays 80% and the utility pays 20% has been somewhat common. One of the topics of that rate case was the utility in question asked to push all those very high volatile costs onto the ratepayer. So this was a response to that. And they had a good policy discussion, and that's all that the bill does. It basically says that, you know, you don't have to use this cost tracking mechanism, but if you do, you will incur at least some of the costs. It doesn't say how much. The idea being that the utility does have some control, even over commodities like coal and natural gas. There's a very sophisticated means they have to go out and take a position in the futures market to lock in those prices, things like that. They can be as efficient as possible and getting these resources. And that's all that this rate sharing does. It gives an incentive to this utility to go out and find these fuels at the lowest cost possible. And so that's what the bill does. We do have a standing commitment, which I'll address at this point. Basically, it adds on page 3, line 6, the words which costs are complete or partial control of the utility. So we don't want to, you know, force them to go out and be responsible for things that they do not have control over. Once again, we're focusing on things that they do control, and they do have some control over how they go out and obtain these various fuel sources. So with that, it alleviates some of the concerns we heard in committee about potentially, if we're too stringent, this could be looked at as a taking potentially. And so the utility is entitled to recovery of their costs by law. And if you don't give it to them, that is looked at as a taking under our Constitution. And so this alleviates some of those concerns. So I'll stand for any questions on the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Senator French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this apply to everybody, like your rural electric co-ops and everybody? Just a little confused on this.
Further questions? Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let's remember that most rural electric cooperatives are not technically rate regulated by the commission unless a subclass of customers come in and complain. Then they're potentially drawn into a rate proceeding. But this whole thing applies in a very specific point of the law, which is, if you look at go to the bill of the first section, it's a specific section of the public utility law that deals with innovative rate making. So they're coming in for something outside of the traditional approach. And what we're saying is you have to have the sharing mechanism if you're going to want to move rates outside the traditional approach. The traditional approach, everybody, let's remember, is that they don't get recovery for these costs until they come in for a rate case. What might be a year or so after the costs increase. If they say we want to have more of a chance to react to costs happening sooner through a kind of a flow-through mechanism, we're saying there has to be a sharing mechanism. And that's what this bill does. The only way that it would apply to a rural electric cooperative is if they were brought into rate regulation because of customer complaints, I would assume. And then the utility asked for the opportunity to bring some kind of a filing under the innovative making section. I really don't think that would ever happen. So, you know, the last thing electric co-op wants to do is be in the public service commission arena, and they keep their customers very happy, with the exception of the large industrials. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question on standing committee amendment.
Move it. Yeah. Question being called. What's it? On the amendment. Yeah, question being called on the amendment, on the standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate file. Where am I at here? 21. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Bill is, where the bill is passed, the amendment is passed. Adopted, the amendment is adopted. I'll get it right here with Ellen's help. The amendment that has been adopted, we're back on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion that the committee of the whole rise to report to do so with the favorable recommendation of Senate File 21, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Senate File 21 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 30. Would the reader please read in Senate File 30? There is an amendment.
Senate File 30, Influencing Jurors and Witnesses, Judges Amendment, an act relating to crimes and offenses sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, was referred to committee number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 30, influencing jurors and witnesses, judges amendment. There is a standing committee amendment. I'd ask that that be read in at this time.
Senate File 30, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 2, line 2, after.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that standing committee amendment and for an explanation of the bill along with the standing committee amendment, I would ask that you call on Senator Schuler.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We bring you Senate File 30, Influencing Juries and Witnesses, Judges Amendment. This is actually a fairly simple bill. We spent quite a bit of time on it in the interim. We heard from a lot of judges that the increase in threats has been not only happening here in Wyoming, but nationwide. And the statistics that we got this morning were that there were about 926 threats against judges in 2015. It bumped up to about 3,000 in 2022. So that's about a 300% increase. And in Wyoming, we had about 166% increase in threats against judges. And these are all kinds of judges. It's district court judges, circuit court judges, Supreme Court judges are even getting some of these kinds of threats. Unfortunately, a number of these threats are happening probably more to the female judges. We heard some anecdotal evidence of a number of threats to females where they were afraid to even leave the courtroom to go to their cars. There was one judge who had a phone call in the middle of the night and was told that her house was going to be blown up. There was a bomb in the house. There was a trial lawyer who told us this morning that this happened also in a courtroom in a trial she was working, that another judge, well, the whole entire place had to be evacuated because they threatened to blow up the courtroom. And it's just been kind of increasing. I think we're seeing a little bit more unease and unrest with some of our clients that are going through the court system. And so bottom line is we think that this clarification by adding judges to 65305 will make a big difference in making sure that our judges feel safe when they get to the courtroom, and not only getting to the courtroom outside in the parking lot and maybe even downtown at the grocery store. So with that, I would go ahead and have you move the amendment. Did you move the amendment? He did already. All right. That amendment, if you take a look at the second page, basically just adds the words in relation to the discharge of their duty. And so again, what we heard was that some of these judges are not only just getting intimidated in their homes, in the courtrooms, but also, in the grocery store, at the gas station. Some of these people that have worked some of the domestic and family issues are getting all kinds of threats. And so we just feel like this amendment it will help not only just in the courtroom and the parking lot outside, but maybe also in their homes. So with that, I would move that, you've already moved that. I would ask for your favorable recommendation on amendment number 1 to Senate File 30, the Standing Committee.
Further questions? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, so within this provision, do we have a definition of the word relation to? What does that mean? Because there's this whole theory out there called the sixth order of separation, that if you go back far enough in the genome, we're all related. And so is a relation, are you all of my relations in here? So I'm trying to look, does this cover your great aunt's uncle's second cousin on your mom's side? Or do we have a definition? Because this seems overly broad when we just knew the term relation to.
Senator Case.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're not talking about my relatives. We're talking about something that's related to my job. And so as the bill previously, I don't have it right in front of me, but before we added the words relation to the amendment, it implied that you had to be directly active as being a judge. The threat occurs in the courtroom. The threat occurs maybe when you're walking into the courtroom, walking out of the courtroom, maybe. But it didn't relate to the fact that because you're a judge on this case, you receive this threat that may happen in the grocery store. It may happen when you're parked outside the grocery store, but it's related to your activity as a judge. I'm not talking about my fourth cousin once removed, Cousin Bobby, and I'd love to tell you a story about him, Mr. Chairman, but that's not what we're talking about.
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to add quickly a little bit to that, we really felt like the language was inadequate without this amendment. This amendment captures what the good senator in the back of the room just talked about, which is you could still, if you're a judge, be threatened on your way out across the parking lot. That would not even cover the parking lot of the courthouse, for example, if a judge is just trying to get to her car. So we wanted to make sure that this bill captures the essence of what we're talking about, and we can visit a little bit more when we get back on the bill. But pretty important stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed on line 11 of the bill on page 1, it already includes judges in that little in 655305, and I don't think it intended to, because I didn't see it in the statutes. But I was wondering if the committee in any way, I know we're just talking about judges here, but have they talked about legislators as well? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we talked about a number of different officers and people. We talked about legislators because there was a legislator on the committee that actually said he or she, I can't remember who it was exactly, it had a lot of threats as well. And we talked about, county attorneys. We talked about a number of issues. For now, we just kind of stayed with judges and felt like maybe we could take a look at this a bit later on to maybe expand more if we needed to. But yeah, I think it's just kind of what society's looking like right now. It's so different from what it used to be. And so we did actually talk in quite a bit of length. I think the judges, the part that you're talking about, good senator from Cheyenne, I think they've amended that 65305A to add the judges already. So that's my understanding.
Further questions? Question being called on the amendment. Those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1, to Senate File 30, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 30 has passed. We're back on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation, Senate File 30, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 30 is passed. Committee of the whole, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 35. Would the reading clerk please read in Senate File 35? There is an amendment.
Senate File 35, Public Records DOC Investigations, an act relating to public records, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, was referred to Committee number 1, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. No, Senator Case. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report and do so with the due pass recommendation on Senate File 35, Public Records DOC Investigations. And fellow senators, this goes into Title 16, Chapter 4 in the area of disclosure and ability to withhold information when it is in the public good. Specifically, that statute states that a custodian of a particular record may deny the right of inspection on the grounds that the disclosure would be contrary to the public interest. So that's where this bill goes. And Mr. Chairman, before I get into the bill, I would like to move the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 35 and ask that it be read in, please.
Senate File 35, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 2, line 7, after.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll get to that amendment in just a moment. Just a couple more things about this little bill. 16.4 Article 2, Mr. Chairman, is a very lengthy 4 pages worth of these exceptions to having to provide information. It goes throughout the ag community. It's into building structure. It involves personnel records and tax records. And so I commend that to you. If you're having trouble sleeping tonight, please read through those 4 pages. All this does is allow for the Department of Corrections in a very limited way to withhold information when they feel like it's for the public good or for the safety of their inmates, for example. The statute specifically references the records of investigations conducted by or the intelligence information or security procedures of any sheriff, county attorney, city attorney, the attorney general, the state auditor, police department, or any investigatory files compiled for any other law enforcement or prosecution purposes. The thing that I want to emphasize today is that this bill would only provide for a very limited amount of these situations for the Department of Corrections to seek relief from that release. And what the committee thought when we took this bill up this morning, we suggested the Standing Committee Amendment number 1. And what we added to the language on page 2 is on page 2, line 7, rather, I apologize. We insert after the word department upon approval by the Attorney General. That includes one more step before the Department of Corrections can just simply withhold that information. I want to talk to you real quickly about the Investigative Services Unit, which is part of the Department of Corrections. Mr. Chairman, that is a 4-person group that does their investigations. They are post-certified. They're not officers of the law, but they do those investigations, which amount to about 7% of all of the cases that take place during a given year. And those are the cases that we're talking about that that the Department of Corrections, if this bill passes, would be able then to go through the Attorney General and suggest that we need to withhold this information for the safety or in the public good. So I hope that is a good enough explanation of the bill and the amendment. If I'd be happy to answer any questions on the amendment. If there are none, I would call for the question. Thank you.
Any questions? All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 35, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 35 has passed. We're back on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would stand for any questions. Otherwise, question on the bill.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some questions about the process here. All of the existing exceptions that are in place in Romanet 1 on page 2 have quite a bit of other statutory requirements on how evidence associated with their investigations proceed, on how that's to be handled and when it's to be released. And then there's a good bit of, I think, precedent in terms of what processes are available to appeal those decisions and what court actions would be taken to do so. The concern I have, and so the question I'd like to ask is, with Department of Corrections investigations, I don't know if all of those protections are already in statute that ensure that there are remedies available, that the information will eventually be released, and that it will be handled in a way through due process similar to what you have elsewhere. So I guess, what's the conversation around how this would actually play out? What the appeal mechanism would be if somebody believes that it is in the public interest and that it's not a sufficient justification for a Department of Corrections investigation to limit access to that information. This is, I think, a sensitive part of statute, as the good members of the committee understand, where it provides some very narrow exceptions where it's in the public interest. And I'm curious how that discussion went before we add additional mechanisms there.
Mr. Chairman, that's a very good question. And I'll take a stab at it and hope I don't trip up. Maybe a member of the committee might jump up behind me if I do. Just as a point of interest, the Department of Corrections received approximately 459 public records requests in 23. Less than 20% were non-incarcerated Wyoming citizens. Those requests have all of the rights that we put in place a couple of years ago. You might recall that the Wyoming Senate worked very hard on some freedom of information law. We set in place an ombudsman, and that would still pertain anytime someone would want to have any of these records released. We have another statute or two which protects parole and inmates, protects probation, and that's statute 71349. But what we're honing on here is information that currently, Mr. Chairman, can be redacted. But here's the issue on some of this information. You've got everything from gang-related activity to all sorts of other nefarious actions that can take place in a correction system. And some of this, even when redacted, requires the Department of Corrections to ship somebody out of state for their protection, knowing that that information may get out there and they may be able to draw information back to somebody who leaked information or provided information to authorities. And they've actually had threats made to to inmates in other states. So that's a little bit more of the impetus behind this bill. But I think that the normal avenues of making a request and working with an ombudsman to say, we don't see why this information is being withheld. I think that avenue still exists for anyone on that front. So I hope that answers the question.
Further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Lanz's motion that the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 35, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Senate File 35 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 55. Would the reading clerk please read in Senate File 55?
Senate File 55, Board of Equalization, questions before the board, an act relating to the State Board of Equalization, sponsored by the Revenue Committee, was referred to committee number 3, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator Beitman, Chairman.
Senator French.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our good Chairman of Revenue is not here. He was in your seat. He's disappeared from that seat. He's not there. So can the good, terrific Senator French continue on with this bill?
If you wish to, Senator French, you can choose to lay the bill back.
What do you think? Yeah. Thanks for the encouragement. All right, well, everybody's gonna help me out here. I would move Senate File 55, Board of Equalization questions before the board. What this is the Board of Equalization, State Board of Equalization. Back in the day, I was county commissioner for 18 years. So I sat on the county Board of Equalization for 18 years. And we would hear a tax protest, protesting the assessor's valuation or whatever. So we would hold the hearing, and the county attorney represents the assessor. We as county commissioners, back in the day, we did it ourselves. You know, we were judge and jury and worked, but we got criticized for that. So anyway, I'm going down a long path to distract all of you. And so we modernized and decided, God, we better get an attorney to represent us. And so we got to where we would record everything in, and we'd have the hearing, and then we'd do the statement of facts, conclusions of law with our attorney, and we might rule on the assessor's behalf or the person protesting. Well, if they didn't like it, they could appeal it to the State Board of Equalization. And that's all the facts that go down there. So in that situation, the County Board of Equalization is kind of like an appellate court, and I'm not an attorney, so no questions along that line. You can't do any new arguments in that appeal. What this is, according to Mr. Herzog, Wyoming State Board of Equalization, I'll just read some of his statements to us in front of Revenue Committee. The bill clarifies the Board of Equalization has authority to resolve tax disputes by considering not only the law focused on by the parties, but any relevant law or points of authority when the parties have failed to do so. The State Board of Equalization is Wyoming's tax court. authorized to hear and rule upon state tax disputes. These tax disputes arise between taxpayers and the Department of Revenue or Department of Transportation. What happens is when the people come in those situations, maybe they forgot one minor thing in the law. What this bill will do was allow the State Board of Equalization to fully examine the law when rendering a tax decision, even aspects of the law that the parties mistakenly failed to consider. In other words, the board is not limited to the parties' understanding of the law and may consider interpretations the parties fail to consider. This ensures that tax disputes resolutions are comprehensive and accurate. In every case, the parties may appeal the board's ruling to the district court. So what it is doing, in my understanding of it, is allowing the State Board of Equalization, if there's some minor thing missed by the parties in front of them, that they can fully implement the law. Maybe it wasn't brought up. So that's my best attempt at this. So I would, if there's not question, I would urge our good Revenue Committee man will help me out here.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a good explanation. This has happened in the past to the board where two parties have brought in incomplete information for them to adjudicate a case. And both interpretations were not correct. And so what they have to do is determine who is least correct. And so it's put them in a very bad situation. Parties have taken that to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has said, no, you according to our statute, you have to only deal with the interpretations that both parties bring to the table. And so all the Board of Equalization is trying to do is be able to open the conversation to the entire scope of the law and present that evidence or present the portions of the law that both parties failed to address in the case. So this will help keep them from their hands being bound because of frankly, the poor work that both parties did. So I think this is a good fix for the Board of Equalization, and will help them streamline their ability to come to a fair conclusion in some of these cases. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Senator French.
As acting Senator Beitman here, this is a good bill. I think it clarifies a lot of things and makes for a more just decision by the State Board of Equalization. And I would ask that you please consider voting for this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator French's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 55, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Senate File 55 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 15. Would the reading clerk please read in Senate File 15?
Senate File 15, Acceptance of Retrocession, Federal Military Installations, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, was referred to Committee number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what's your pleasure, Senator Boner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 15. And to explain this good little bill, I direct your attention to my colleague from Laramie County.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, Senate File 15, was the work of your Transportation, Highways and Military Affairs Committee during the interim. This bill aims to streamline the investigation and adjudication process for offenses committed on military installations by civilians and juveniles, not subject to the Uniform Military Code. So if you'll note in the bill title, it authorizes the governor to accept retrocession over military installations. And so about little over 130 years ago, in 1893, the state of Wyoming ceded its jurisdiction rights over what was to be FE Warren Air Force Base to the federal government. So this bill is basically allowing the state to bring those rights back to them in an offer of what's called retrocession. So retrocession is a legal term used to describe the action of the federal government that returns concurrent jurisdiction back to the state. So what does this law do and why do we want it? Some of the local benefits, local law enforcement presence at certainly at our we have a public school out there in the school district number 1 called Freedom Elementary. It would result in improved student safety, certainly in active shooter responses. Local law enforcement around the exterior perimeter of the base would result in improved traffic safety for motorists. Shared jurisdiction would result in more effective response to domestic violence and child abuse cases that occur on the base. And the civilian law enforcement's presence on the base could also make it possible for the base to offer parking for Cheyenne Frontier Days. So there's many reasons why we should do this. Now, if you look, the bill basically is creating a new section on page 2, paragraph G, and you'll see that the governor may accept in writing on behalf of the state full or partial retrocession of jurisdiction, criminal, civil, juvenile, or any combination thereof over any military installations and land previously ceded to the United States. So that's basically what we're doing. So it's an acceptance by the governor. If passed, the DOD would have to take action to cede, to retrocede jurisdiction. And then the governor would have to formally accept it through the Secretary of State. And so it's a mutual partnership. Both parties have to do this. It benefits both parties. Also, just for your knowledge, cases vary from year to year, but there's an average of about 50 cases each year that where this would come into effect. Mostly, the majority just typically are traffic cases. So the caseload is not high. So if passed, again, Senate File 15 removes barriers to the investigation and adjudication of domestic violence, child abuse, and juvenile delinquency. It would create a mechanism to start the concurrent jurisdiction process, would allow both federal and state authorities to handle the offenses, provide better resources and options for prosecution, especially for juvenile cases and civilian offenses. Testimony by both the DOD and the local jurisdictions were positive. So I encourage you to vote this bill up. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious about costs, and I read the fiscal note, and it seemed to imply that there were indeterminate costs associated with it because the state would then become responsible for policing of certain events that hadn't been the responsibility of the state before. And I guess my question is, in places where this takes place or has happened before, what are the fiscal implications? Are we just going to have in the case as outlined, 50 additional actions that have to be dealt with by the local community or by state law enforcement that weren't before? Or alternatively, is there a negotiation that typically goes on in this case where additional federal funds are provided to provide law enforcement for this retro-ceded territory in addition to what we were previously receiving? How does that work?
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the bill and I find this interesting. I appreciate the cleanup in paragraph A, the reference to Fort Francis E. Warren being changed to F.E. Warren Air Force Base. That's accurate. But then you read the rest of the list, Fort Washakie, Camp Sheridan, Camp Pilot Butte, and then the Powder Depot at Cheyenne. Mainly with Fort Washakie, I was just curious because now my understanding is that's an Indian reservation. So I'm wondering if there technically still is a Fort Washakie that's affected. And if we're doing a cleanup bill, if you looked at going beyond just F.E. Warren Air Force Base in this kind of cleanup and how we understand these military reservations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer the last question first, that was not brought up in any of the discussion. Certainly, I can get with the folks that presented this bill, both from the DOD side and probably from the DOD side, to find out whether all these other locations are still active. I'm assuming since they're in statute that they're still, I mean, the authority is there. Whether we need to remove some of those, I don't know, but I'll check on that and try to give you an answer by second reading. To the first question on the fiscal note, we actually looked at this number and couldn't figure out where this came from. You know, in their note, it said turning F.E. Warren into a state jurisdiction results in a whole new population of potential criminal defendants and juvenile delinquents. Well, that's not what's happening. So I'm not sure if whoever wrote this report was not looking at the situation correctly, but typically, as I said, there are 57 average cases, most of them just traffic violations. There is, I believe the bill cost, according to DOD, does not, certainly there's no appropriation in the bill. In the future, if the governor decides to accept a retrocession over F.E. Warren, he can do it partially or fully. So there may be, it might be likely that there might be an attorney needed, an extra attorney. I don't know that. But I suppose that if the caseload gets higher than expected, somebody would come back and ask for additional funds for another person. Where the agency estimate says 3 additional people. Can't see that for 57 cases, and most of them being traffic stops. Don't know where those numbers came from, but no one was concerned in committee. Neither the governor's office or the city of Cheyenne or DOD.
Okay, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's excellent explanation from my colleague. Just a little bit further nuance. If the governor does, accept this jurisdiction, at this point, it would require modification to a current agreement between the Laramie County DA and the judge advocate on Warren Air Force Base, which currently exists. If you're a active duty military member and you get in trouble downtown, they still have to decide where that case is going to be tried when there's, dual jurisdictions because of the person's status as an active duty military member. So that would be determined on a case by case basis. I imagine those discussions happen all the time, potentially based on the workload in either office. So yeah, I agree with my colleague. And to be clear, the local DA did support this bill and thought that the workload was going to be so small that it it wasn't really a huge concern. Another note is that, another thing this does is offers up, say, our DFS system to active duty military dependent. So there could be additional cost if the a child is, included into that system. But obviously that's the reason for the bill, I would argue, because right now, if there's a trouble with a military family, the only recourse they have is a federal court system, which isn't very good for those sorts of things. So I hope you can support the bill. Appreciate my colleague looking into further with those good questions, and certainly stand for any further questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Okay. May I hear in the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rise and report it, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 15, please say aye. All those opposed? Senate File 15 is passed the committee of the whole. Senator Barlow,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Privilege of the floor.
the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So colleagues in the Senate, up in the gallery above the chairman is the members of the Gillette Area Leadership Institute. They're here. I think they spent the morning with our military department, and then they spent some time with the executive branch. And now they're to the most important branch of government, the legislative branch and the Wyoming Senate. So please welcome Gillette Area Leadership to the Senate chambers. Stand up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you and welcome to the Senate. Okay. Next and final bill up for our consideration is Senate File 17. Will the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 17, Plane Coordinate System Amendments, an act relating to the plane coordinate system, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure, Senator Boner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 17. And to explain this bill, I defer to my colleague from Sweetwater County.
Senator Cole.
Mr. Chairman, we have here a rather technical. What it amounts to is it's an update to our mapping system to identify points on the earth. And it is a new, an optional, I repeat, optional way of doing this. It is not mandatory. It does not preclude the use of the other methods of identifying locations. So this is a mapping data system that allows, in this case, the use of a more accurate, a more uniform, more accepted system of identifying points on the earth. It's rather technical how they do it, but the earth is constantly moving. And so to try to track things is always a challenge. This is what they've come up with currently. That's the best current technical way they have of mapping. It doesn't change property lines. It doesn't change boundaries. It's merely a large scale mapping choice that you could have. And it's an option. I repeat, an option. It's not mandatory. You can choose to use it or not. And it's, I guess I could read on page 5, line 15, instead of shall, it says may be presented and recorded using this methodology. It is just an update to our current standards and an option if people wish to use it to try to get us more in line with what is going on around us. So we use a system that people could opt in for identifying as for the purposes of the NGS. It's like I say, it's a rather, if someone would like a further explanation about any of these parts and pieces, maybe I know it's a lot to take in, and I could probably do a better job of explaining it if needed. So I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few. A few years ago, this came before the TRW committee and we spent some time on it in the interim, and it was one of the more challenging things we worked on. LSO prepared a memo where they were cautioning us about the non-delegation authority. We are not supposed to adopt standards, federal rules that haven't yet been promulgated because we don't know what they are and they don't exist. And so we went round and around and around trying to figure that out. And I don't know that it's resolved. And when I read this bill, I don't know that it's resolved either, because it says that the most recent version of the coordinate system is the one that's been established by NGS based on the NSRS. So we don't even know what that is, maybe? That makes me a little nervous. And so I just want to make sure, since I got grilled over this by many of you and others, I just want to make sure that that issue has been resolved. The other issue that arose with this was where the geodetic universe is housed within state government. My recollection at the time was that it was at ETS, and I think our appropriations committee was going to maybe find it a new home, either in some other state agency. And because of the work that this involves, a number of state agencies would have been sufficient. I know some of our neighbors have it housed within their state libraries and things like that. So I'm wondering if that was ever discussed as, when we're making these determinations, because that always seemed to be the simple fix. If we tell an agency that they shall adopt and promulgate rules, then they could look at the most recent version of whatever the plane coordinate system exists out there and keep up with it. And we don't need to revisit this issue. They could adopt rules. But this statute just kind of exists on its own, and it's up to us to adopt what that system is. And so that's where you see the statutory language. So I think it would make better sense if we actually found it a home. And so I'm wondering if in the interim that was discussed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was not intentional.
Drop the mic. Let's go to Senator Pappas first and then.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is a very technical subject, and the National Geodetic Survey, the NGS that you mentioned, has maintained this NSRS, which is the National Spatial Reference System. They've maintained it for over 200 years. Okay, and so this is defined as a consistent coordinated system that defines latitude, longitude, height, scale, gravity, and orientation throughout the United States. And so there's been many systems that define property lines and meets and bounds and all of that. So the impacts, and we had the folks from the BLM who are experts in this spatial system come and give us a kind of a briefing on and trying to teach us lay people about spatial data systems. It's a little difficult for most of us to think about, but they put it in pretty good terms. It's most beneficial to engineering and professional surveying professions, obviously, and those who use that data. There's a multitude of infrastructure projects that really require this data to be consistent and on the same page. And there's different datums out there, and there are ways to translate from one to another. But as time goes on, these datums get more precise. And so the intent of this is to always keep us to the most precise datum available. And other states have done this. They've passed, I believe there's 7 of them, including 2 that three of them that bound our borders, that have passed this legislation as is. There is one that has not, that bounds our border, but they're looking at that legislation right now. And then there's 16 other states in the union, not on our borders, that are also considering this as well. So it's not just us. It's not like we're trying to blaze the trail here. Many states have already passed this, and many states are looking at it. But we're told that this is the best practices to future-proof any risks to our local and county governments for maintaining data that misaligns, that creates misalignment, without having a common standard. Those misalignments can easily be, a problem. But if we keep up with, the latest and greatest data, then we alleviate those problems going forward. So again, it was very technical. Not sure that I understand it all, but certainly to make the case that we keep our state plane coordinate system congruent with the national spatial system, I think is good for us to do that.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boner, jump in here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think to maybe drill down some of the specifics of my colleagues' questions. Second one first, I know we didn't have any discussion about any sort of reorganization. It sounds like that discussion has passed us by. It's still in A&I. And as far as the delegation, I appreciate my colleague sending us the memo from a few years ago. I'm just going to read directly from a court case from 1994 that had something to say on this matter in the Wyoming Supreme Court. It said, the legislature must define standards as reasonably precise a fashion as the subject matter permits. The will of the legislature must be clear. The agency is not permitted to follow its own course in articulating rules. And now I'm not an attorney, you all know that, but I'm looking at, top of page 3. It gives very clear direction that, you're going to use the most recent coordinate system from the NGS based on NCRS. And so there's I don't think there's any doubt as to which system we're going to be using. The whole point of the statute is to provide a standard method, a standard system for, so everybody's on the same page. And I think that, the statute achieves that currently, and the bill achieves that by, you don't have to put in the exact name of the standards every time. That doesn't seem like a very good way of doing business in our statutes. So I think that there's enough direction here, given the technical nature of the subject matter, to alleviate those concerns.
Thank you, Senator. Now to you, Senator Ellis, and then we'll go to Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to caution the body. I did send you the memo that came out, and I don't disagree with the ends. When I learned about this, I thought it was a fascinating issue. I loved learning about it. I agree that better technology's out there. I'm all in. It's how we get there. And so I'm just telling you, when I worked on this issue, the question was, we can't in statute simply adopt a standard that hasn't been written yet. That's a constitutional concern. So the workaround that we talked about was, well, how do we empower an agency to have rulemaking authority so that we can wash our hands of this? And so when a better coordinate system comes along in the future, we don't have to debate it as we are right now. We can delegate that authority to one of the state agencies, and they can keep on top of it through the rulemaking. So that's where we had the conversation of, well, which agency should do that? And then they're in charge of updating the standard. So that's the concern that was raised to me, really, really raised to me. And so I just don't think it's been resolved. That's all.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hutchings?
Just clarification. I think I've heard of this before, actually at church. If I'm understanding in the latest of layman's terms, the national mapping system gets changed every once in a while. And when it does, instead of Wyoming constantly updating the statutes to the new standards, we're just trying to say, we'll accept whatever the national standard is. Is that correct? Or am I understanding that correctly? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Senator Ellis?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And I think that is the problem. The Constitution says we can't delegate our authority to adopt laws and rules that we haven't seen yet. So we can't simply just write a prospective rule that says we will adopt any, standard out there, because we don't know what that is. So that's why we usually, in other contexts, delegate that to a state agency. We see that all the time. Department of Environmental Quality, they have people that review what's happening at the federal level, making sure they align with our state regulations. I mean, they smooth all that out. But because the state plane coordinate system kind of exists on its own, it doesn't really have oversight or a home in state government, we can't delegate it to another agency to keep up with it. So I think a solution would be to find a home for it. I know that we've had the conversations. I think Appropriations Committee over the years have had discussions about it. I don't know that they ever found a home for it, but that's the concern.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I don't mean to belabor or slow us down in any way. Having sat through all of the conversations that the good senator just outlined, serving on her committee, I shared some of those concerns. But this is one of those bills that, you know, I'm not being critical of it at all. I share the excitement over a brand new technology piece or whatever, but my concern is for us senators who go back home is, I'm just trying to look at this thing and say, well, is there going to be an unintended consequence here somewhere? Is somebody going to get surveyed under this brand new, you know, plane coordinate and then take me to court on some property of mine saying, well, the Wyoming coordinate system NAD 1983 just doesn't quite cut it, see, because we got a new boundary line here. So, Mr. Chairman, your boundary line gets moved, see? Except it says, and I'm just trying to make sure that we're not going to use it. This doesn't say you could use it, but then why are we adopting if we're not going to use it? I just don't want any unintended consequences by somebody utilizing either one of these programs and saying, well, we're going to change our boundary lines. Or, you know, one of my constituents gives me a call and says, guess what? I ended up in court because somebody used a new system to plot my ground. I just need a little bit of comfort on that level before I go forward. Thank you.
Senator Boner, is he out of bounds?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we specifically asked that question. As you can imagine, there's a couple ag producers on the committee. Answer's no. The answer is no, that's not a concern. So we absolutely went over that. Once again, what this is, it's simply acknowledging that, you know, there's such thing as plate tectonics. The Earth's the equator expands and contracts. So that same plate, the place we're standing right now, does move in relation to other places on the earth, even though we're still here. The Wyoming State Capitol is still here. That's what this measures, this geodetic information. So the answer is no. That's not, just from a purely technical standpoint, that's not what we're talking about here.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, to be very clear, it doesn't change any boundaries, has nothing to do with that. I know it's a hard concept to get a hold of. So in that aspect of it, it has no relationship to a current fence boundary or anything else, or nothing is going to move. It's larger than that. Okay, so we're not talking about a map that you find your way down the street here. It's not that kind of map. It's more of a map of identifying things on the planet Earth. So it's a whole different kind of thing. So you got to kind of unwrap your mind around the idea of what a regular map looks like. And this is merely a map that identifies our planet. And what they did was they drew us a sphere, a synthetic sphere. And from that point, they measure points. It doesn't have anything to do with property boundaries. That question was asked, and obviously if it did, that would be no good. And on top of it, it says it may be used. I think, and the letter says this may be a problem. I think it's worth asking and researching if it is a problem. If, you know, not having a set standard, if that's going to be an issue. I agree with that. And if it is, maybe we can have an amendment that will address that and set it in stone at a certain point. I think that's a reasonable request at this point in time. And I have further questions. I will try to do my best. I think we have a lot of other people here that have another way of looking at it. And maybe that'll work for some folks. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Back to you, Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my colleague from Laramie County, from Cheyenne here, question about we can't really legislate in things that are not present yet. I may push back a little bit on that. I think we can do those things. You know, I've seen it done in building codes. I've seen it done with, you know, where we automatically just take the next building code and it becomes law. I mean, we certainly have the right to change that if we want. Half the time I sit in this body and we legislate on things and somebody says, well, that's unconstitutional. It's against our Constitution. Well, but it isn't. If we decide it's constitutional in here, somebody has to tell us that it's not, right? Somebody in a black robe. So I believe that the buck stops with us. I think we have that authority to do that. Whether you believe it or not, I do believe that. I say, if we put it in there, I think we have that authority to be able to allow a new system as it evolves to still be effective in Wyoming. And if we don't like it, we can always change it down the road. But certainly things like a geospatial system like this, that the National Spatial System has, it's going to be refined over and over and over again. This is not going to be the last. It's been refined for 200 years. And we always go to the newest, greatest system. So I don't have the concern that my colleague from Cheyenne has. I hope you don't either. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another idea, it's kind of like Baskin Robbins. You got 31 ice creams, right? You can pick an ice cream flavor that you like. And that's literally what these mapping choices are. You can pick one. It doesn't mean you're precluded from picking any, you know, you can pick whatever you like. It says right there in the document, may. And that was language that was changed. It was amended from shall to may. So I don't see what the downside is. What is the danger? What are we offering that could have a negative impact when you can choose? And we're trying to get into a national system so our borders match. And there's a lot of pluses to this. And you know, if I want to pick Tutti Frutti, then I guess I can. I don't see what's wrong with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was listening and fairly well convinced that I was comfortable to a certain level until I heard you get to choose. And as someone who lives in a rural area and has the stewardship, privilege of stewardship and ownership of land, there are places in our community and even on our lands where there are multiple brass caps. A different surveyor will have said, no, this is actually this is the corner of this section. And then 20 years later, it gets moved. And then 20 years gets moved. So when I read this, and I'm going to look at page 5, this is 3425-105. This is what was just being spoken about. And the may. So now I purchase a piece of land where the neighboring land gets sold, and a new system is used to survey that land. And now, is there another option to where the corner or the boundary or the property line is? And now how do we resolve those issues? So I'll probably vote for the bill here, but I'm gonna want to understand a little better how we resolve these things, because this is about recording property, land, public land records and deed records. So this is about the ownership of property where this can be applied. So I think I appreciate the hard work that's been gone into this in this year's committee, the previous year's committee work, and the understanding they have. But I want to know the practical application for you or me as a landowner, as a homeowner, within, whether it's in a subdivision or out in rural America, what this means to now my deed, should there be a sale or a new a sale of the property or the neighboring property, and how that gets resolved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cole.
Now, try to take another stab at it, and it is complicated. And those are valid concerns that were given. And those were questions that were asked. So I'll try to relate it in another way to the good folks here. We got a point in the Soviet Union, okay? And we got a point in the United States. This is a way of accurately defining that distance and placement on the planet Earth. Has nothing to do with, you know, where Rock Springs, Wyoming. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with placement on the planet. And it doesn't change a boundary. That was the testimony. And I think that, you know, if we need to get clarification for that or verification for that, I think that's probably what we have to do. But to be clear, the testimony was it has nothing to do with anything would change. We asked a question about fence lines. Nope, will not change it. So I think it's a valid question, obviously something that we had asked, and obviously the body, if it doesn't feel comfortable with that, I think we'll do our best to get an answer for you. And where I think we're at right now to that question. And I do appreciate the questions, and it is a big lift and obviously difficult to wrap your arms around. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope we can wrap this up here, but to my colleague from Campbell County, looking at 3425-105, both the current language and the proposed new language, it seems that the point of that section is to set standards. If you are going to use a plan coordinate system, it sets some standards as to how that's going to work. And so just to be clear about what the general point of that section is. And so we're not, even though we're changing may from the shall, you have to read the whole paragraph, right? So I'm not sure if we're really making a substantive policy choice here that we would normally associate with changing a shall to a may. If you read the whole sentence, it seems to me the point of that section is just saying, if you're going to use it, this is some basic standards. So with that, I think I'll call for the question and certainly engage with members who have voice some concerns here, make sure we're all good to go for second reading, if it gets there.
There's no more discussion. The senator's called for the question. You ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 17, please say aye. Those opposed? Senate File 17 is passed. The committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee of the whole rise and report.
Heard the motion. All in favor? All those opposed? It's a close one, but motion carries.
Senator Biteman.
I move the adoption.
Excuse me.
Oh,
need to read in.
yeah, I don't have a
That's
report
my-
to adopt, so how's it going?
Reader, reader.
Mr. President. Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 4, do pass. Senate File 8, do pass. Senate File 21, do pass amended. Senate File 30, do pass amended. Senate File 35, do pass amended. Senate File 55, do pass. Senate File 15, do pass. Senate File 17, do pass. Senators Biteman and Kolb, Chairman.
Senator Biden, now I can actually call on correctly.
Mr. President, that was a beautiful report. I had moved the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is passed. Nice work, Chairman. Committee reports, please.
February 14, 2024. Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 60, 2024 large project funding. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Nethercott. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 14, 2024. Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 90, State Managed Local Government Equity Investment Pool. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Nethercott. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 70, Investment Modernization State Non-Permanent Funds 2. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Nethercott. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 38, Financial Reporting Amendments 2. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, and Salazar. Excused, Senator Nethercott. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 14, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 50, Unincorporated Nonprofit DAOs. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, Dockstader, Jones, and Rothfuss. Conflict, Senator Ellis. Senator Dockstader, Chairman.
Stack of Mason's manuals up here at the front, so anybody that doesn't have one or wants one, at the media table here, you can check in and check with Mr. True about getting one. We'll take care of you. Announcements. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Corporations Committee will meet tomorrow morning, Thursday, February 15th at 7:30 a.m. Note the earlier start time, 7:30 a.m. At room W110 and online to consider the following bills. Senate File 22, Public Service Commission, Electricity Reliability. That's a continuation. Senate File 23, Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans. And Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs. Again, Corporations Committee tomorrow, February 15th at 7:30 a.m. Room W110. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee number 6 will meet tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock at Capitol Extension Room W02 and online. We will take a look at 2 bills, Senate File 18, Indian Child Welfare Act Safe Haven Amendments, and Senate File 37, Indian Child Welfare Act Delinquency Amendments. Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick heads up, early heads up for my committee on Friday morning at 8 a.m. Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee number 10 will hear the following 4 bills: Organ Transplant Recipient Protection, SF5, SF6, Nursing Home Administrators, Temporary Licenses, SF7, Behavioral Health Redesign, Vulnerable Adults, and SF81, Hospital or Healthcare District Created Entities Immunities. Study them up, be ready for them.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet tomorrow on noon recess, to take up the following bills. Senate File 54, Homeowners Tax Exemption. NW06 and online.
Thank you. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee will be meeting early on Friday. I wanted to get the notice out soon, just so senators can plan. We will take at 7:30 on Friday morning in W4 downstairs. We'll take up Senate File 53, that 6th Judicial District Number of Judges Bill. Then we'll go with Senate Files 92, Registered Sex Offender Employment Restrictions, Senate File 31, Sex Offender Registration Promoting Obscenity, and Senate File 34, Sex Offender Registration Registrable Offenses. Again, that's on Friday morning. Thank you.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet Thursday, tomorrow morning, February 15th at 8 a.m. in the Capitol Extension Room 6 and online to consider the following bills: Senate File 66, Water Exchange Amendments, and Senate File 65, Temporary Water Use Agreements Amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Clears the desk, Senator, or Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a motion for us?
Mr. President, I want the microphone, please.
Oh, I've got your neighbors on. I'm sorry. That's my bad. So,
Mr. President, I want everybody to listen to this. I move we stand recessed until 9:30 a.m. Thursday, February 15th. Mr. President, we will be gaveling in at 9:30 in the morning.
one more time, 9:30 tomorrow morning. Motion's been made. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. You call for a division? Divisions. All in favor, stand. Better do her. I called for her. Better get up. We need, there we go. Okay. All right, we're exercised out. We're adjourned till 9:30 Thursday,
So, Mr.
February 15th. Thank you all.
Mr. President, I'm glad that the members understood the next motion. So I have to tell a story. My dad was enlisted in the Army, was in Korea. But one day they all marched the troops out and said, we're gonna do a 4-mile run today, and I'd like to have any volunteers that don't want to have to carry an M1 today. And he thought, well, heck, I don't want to carry that 14-pound rifle. So he raised his hand. So they give him a 45-pound BAR and said, you're running with that today. So just for future reference, if y'all want over turnout, we'll start at 6 a.m. the next day. It only goes one way.